I was so proud of her. I was so happy. Until the morning I opened my laptop and read what she had written to me. The message was short. No greeting, no "Mom." Just a subject line that said regarding the wedding and 3 sentences that told me I was not welcome to attend my only daughter's wedding in person. She said it would be logistically complicated. She said her fiancé's family was very particular about the guest list. She said I could watch on Zoom. She had already set up a link for me. I sat at my kitchen table in Sudbury for a long time after that. The coffee went cold. The February light came through the window, the way it always does in northern Ontario in winter, thin and pale, like it's apologizing for itself. And I just sat there, reading those 3 sentences over and over, trying to find the version of them that didn't mean what they clearly meant. I couldn't find it. Her name is Naomi. She is 31 years old. And I raised her by myself from the time she was 4, after her father left for Fort McMurray and stopped sending child support after the 2nd year. I worked the front desk at a medical clinic. I cleaned offices on weekends when the overtime at the clinic ran out. I packed her school lunches and helped her with her homework at the kitchen table of our apartment on Elm Street. And I told her every single day that she was brilliant and capable and that nothing about where we started would determine where she ended up. I meant every word of it. I still do. Naomi did end up somewhere. She got a scholarship to study business at Queen's University in Kingston. She graduated with honors. She moved to Toronto, got a job at a financial consulting firm, met a man named Sebastian whose family owned a chain of private dental clinics across the GTA, and somewhere in the middle of all of that becoming, she began to quietly, carefully erase me. I did not understand it at first. I told myself she was busy. I told myself the distance was hard. When she stopped inviting me to things, I told myself I was being sensitive. When she stopped calling unless she needed something, a copy of her birth certificate, a signature on a student loan document she had somehow forgotten to close out. I told myself that was just how adult children were sometimes. You raise them to be independent, and then you are surprised when they are. But there were signs I did not let myself look at directly. The first one came about a year after she moved to Toronto. She called me on a Sunday evening, which was unusual, and she was nervous in a way I recognized. She gets a certain tightness in her voice when she is about to ask for something she knows she should not be asking for. She told me she had met Sebastian's parents. She told me they had asked about her background, her family, where she grew up, and then she said very carefully, I just told them we're from a small town. I didn't get into specifics. It's easier. I asked her what easier meant. She said, Mom, you know how people are. I did not push. I should have, but I did not, because I was so relieved she had called at all that I was willing to take the version of the conversation she was offering me and not ask questions about the part she was leaving out. The second sign came at her convocation, years earlier. But I only understood it later. Sebastian had attended. They were already dating by then, and I remember being introduced to him in the parking lot outside Grant Hall. He shook my hand and smiled and said he'd heard so much about me. I thought that was a good thing. I wore the blue dress I'd bought at Reitman's the week before. And I took photographs on my phone, and I was so happy I could have floated right off the ground. What I didn't understand until much later was that he had met me. He had stood there in that parking lot and looked at me and shaken my hand. He knew what I looked like. He knew I existed. Which means that everything Naomi told him afterward was a choice. The story, as I eventually pieced it together, was this. I was not her mother. I was a distant relative, an aunt of some kind, someone who had helped out when she was young. Her parents, she had told Sebastian and his family, were professionals. Her father was a retired engineer. Her mother had passed away when Naomi was in her 20s. It was a sad story. She apparently told it with great feeling, and no one questioned it, because why would they? She was poised and well-spoken, and she had built herself into exactly the kind of woman the story required. I found all of this out from my sister, who lives in Brampton and who had the misfortune of running into one of Sebastian's cousins at a work function. The cousin made a comment about Naomi's parents having both passed, and my sister, not understanding what she was walking into, said, "No, her mom lives up in Sudbury. I just spoke to her last month." The cousin went quiet. My sister came home and called me. I sat with that information for 3 weeks before I did anything with it. I am not a person who acts out of anger. I have lived too long and worked too hard to let anger make decisions for me. But I will tell you that those 3 weeks were some of the quietest and most painful of my life, because I kept coming back to the same question. When exactly had she decided I was something to be hidden? Was it when she got the scholarship? When she moved to Toronto? When she met his family for the first time? Or had the decision been forming longer than that, quietly, somewhere in the gap between who she was becoming and where she had come from? I called her. I told her what my sister had told me. She denied it at first, then admitted it, then cried, then told me I didn't understand the pressure she was under, that Sebastian's family had very specific expectations, that she would fix it eventually, that she just needed a little more time. I told her I loved her. I told her I was not going to pretend to be dead for anyone's comfort. She said she understood. She said things would change. That was 8 months before the wedding invitation did not arrive. And then came the email. I did not respond right away. I made myself wait a full day, and then another. I went to work. I ate my dinner. I watched the news. I prayed a little, which I do not do often, but sometimes there is nothing else left. And when I finally sat down to write back, I kept it very short. I said I had received her message. I said I understood. I said I hoped the day would be everything she had dreamed of. I did not tell her what I was planning to do next. Here is what I did. I called my sister in Brampton and I told her everything. She was furious in the way that younger sisters are furious, fast and hot, and wanting to do something immediately. And I had to ask her to slow down and think with me. I called two women I have known since Naomi was in primary school, both of whom had been present for her childhood in the way that neighbors and friends are present, who had driven her to skating lessons and attended her school plays and brought casseroles to our apartment when I had my appendix out in 2003. I called Naomi's old guidance counselor, who had written her scholarship reference letter and who had stayed in touch over the years, and I gathered what I had. I had photographs, 27 years of them. Naomi at 6 months old in the apartment on Elm Street. Naomi at her first communion at St. Andrew's. Naomi at 14, sitting across from me at our kitchen table with her chemistry textbook open. The overhead light catching her face in that way that always made me want to memorize her. I had her original birth certificate, with my name on it, with our address on Elm Street listed, with every true fact of her life right there in black ink. I had the letters from the Ontario Student Assistance Program, sent to our home address, the ones she had asked me to sign, the ones with my name on them. I had voicemails she had left me, ones I had saved for no particular reason, except that I kept everything she gave me, including her voice. The wedding was on a Saturday in April, St. Michael's Cathedral Basilica in Toronto. Sebastian's family had connections. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock. I arrived at 11:30, alone. I had taken the train down the night before and stayed at a Holiday Inn on King Street. I wore the same blue dress from her convocation. I had not planned that. It was just the nicest dress I owned. I want to be careful here about what I say I intended to do, because I am still not entirely sure myself. I did not go there to ruin the day. I want you to believe that, though I understand if you find it hard. I went there because she was my daughter and it was her wedding, and I had held her when she cried and stayed up with her when she was sick and worked 2 jobs so she could go to a school that would open every door she ever walked through. I went there because no email was going to be the last word between us. I arrived before the guests. I spoke to the priest. I want to tell you that I had planned what I said to him, but honestly, I just told him the truth. I said I was the bride's mother. I said there had been a misunderstanding. He was a gentleman, older than me, Irish-born, and he looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, "Every family has its complications." He let me in. My sister and the two women from Naomi's childhood sat in the third pew from the back. The guidance counselor had not been able to come. She was in Nova Scotia visiting her own grandchildren, but she had written a letter which I had in my bag along with everything else. I sat in the second pew. I put my purse on my lap. I folded my hands and I waited. I saw the moment Naomi walked in. She was at the back of the church with her bridesmaids, and she looked beautiful. She was wearing her grandmother's pearl earrings, my mother's earrings, the ones I had given her when she turned 25. She looked the way I had always imagined she would look on her wedding day, and for a moment I felt nothing but love for her. Pure and uncomplicated, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back. Then she saw me. I watched the color leave her face. I watched her take a step backward, almost involuntarily, and I watched one of her bridesmaids put a hand on her arm. Then she straightened. She lifted her chin. She walked down the aisle. When she passed my pew, she did not look at me again. Sebastian's family was on the left side of the church. I had been watching them since I arrived. An elegant couple in the front row. A cluster of cousins and siblings filling in behind them. At some point during the procession, Sebastian's mother leaned over to her husband and said something, and he shook his head slightly. I noticed his mother look at me once, then at her husband, then back toward the altar. The ceremony began. I sat. I did not interrupt. I did not make a sound. I watched my daughter marry a man I had never been formally introduced to, in a church I had not been invited to, wearing my own mother's pearls. During the signing of the register, when the guests were milling and the organist was playing and the noise in the church had risen to that pleasant, celebratory hum, Sebastian's mother made her way to my pew. She sat down next to me. She introduced herself. She said, "I don't believe we've met. I'm Margaret." And then she caught herself and said, "I'm sorry, are you a friend of the family?" I told her I was Naomi's mother. She looked at me the way people look at something they have been told cannot exist. I opened my bag. I did not hand her everything at once. I handed her the birth certificate first. She read it. She read it again. Then I handed her a photograph. Naomi at her grade 12 graduation, standing next to me in the gym at Llewellyn Park Secondary School. Both of us grinning, Naomi in her cap and gown, my arm around her shoulders. Sebastian's mother held the photograph for a long time. Then she looked up at me and I could see she was doing the thing that intelligent people do when they have been fooled, running back through everything, looking for the places where it had been held together with wire and wishful thinking. She excused herself. She found Sebastian. I watched them talk near the side chapel, and I watched his face do the same thing hers had done. Then he looked across the room at Naomi. I did not hear what was said between the two of them. I was not close enough, and honestly, I did not try to be. That conversation belonged to them. What I know is that the reception that evening took place without me, and that Sebastian left the rehearsal dinner venue they had booked for the evening photographs and did not return for 2 hours, and that the photographs from that day, which I later saw on a mutual contact's social media, did not include a picture of the full wedding party. The day did not end the way Naomi had planned. I do not say that with satisfaction. I say it because it is true. What happened after was slower and harder than any dramatic confrontation could have been. Sebastian called me 3 days later. He was polite and measured in the way that people are when they are very angry and working hard not to show it. He asked me a few questions. I answered them honestly. He thanked me and hung up. Naomi called me 2 weeks after that. She did not apologize immediately. I had not expected her to. She cried, which I had also expected, And for the first few minutes, she said things about pressure and expectations and how I didn't understand what it was like to try to build a life in a world where every door opened just slightly faster if you were a certain kind of person from a certain kind of place. I let her say all of it. Some of it was even true. Then she got quiet, and in the quiet I heard something I had not heard from her in a long time. Something younger, something from Elm Street. She said, "I'm so ashamed, Mom." I said, "I know." She said, "I don't know how to fix it." I said, "You start by telling the truth. You start there, and then you keep going." We talked for 2 hours that evening. She told me things I had suspected and things I hadn't. Sebastian had been upset, genuinely upset, not just about the lie itself, but about the years of it, the architecture of it, the way she had looked him in the eye across 1,000 dinners and let him believe something that was not real. His mother had apparently been more understanding than either of them expected, which surprised Naomi. It surprised me too, though maybe it shouldn't have. Women who have raised children often have a longer view of what children are capable of doing to the people who love them most. Sebastian and Naomi are still together. I know because she told me, and I choose to believe her. I have been to their home in Toronto once since then. A condo in Leslieville. Very nice. Plants on every windowsill the way Naomi has always liked. Sebastian shook my hand at the door, the way he had shaken it in the parking lot at Queen's, except this time he knew exactly who I was. His mother had sent me a card, handwritten, on heavy cream stationery. She said she was glad to know the real story. She said she hoped we would have the chance to know each other properly. I keep the card in the same drawer as the birth certificate and the photographs. Naomi drove me to the train station when I left Toronto. We sat in the car in the drop-off lane for a few minutes before I got out, and she held my hand the way she used to when she was small, and the world felt too big. She didn't say anything. I didn't either. Some things don't need to be spoken to be understood. I want to be honest with you about one thing before I finish. People have asked me, since all of this, whether I feel like I won, whether I feel vindicated, whether showing up that day was worth it. I don't think about it that way. I didn't go to that church to win anything. I went because I am her mother. Because the $43 train ticket and the Holiday Inn room and the blue Reitman's dress were the least I could offer the little girl who once sat across from me at a kitchen table in a Sudbury apartment and asked me if things were ever going to get easier. I told her yes. I told her they would. I was not wrong. I've had a lot of time to think about what that blue dress means to me now. I wore it to her convocation. I wore it to her wedding. I didn't plan that. It just happened, the way a lot of true things happen, without any drama or intention behind them. But sitting on that train back to Sudbury, watching the Ontario landscape go gray and flat outside the window, I kept thinking about the dress and what it meant that I had worn it twice to two of the biggest days of her life, and she had tried to make me invisible at both of them. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I'm past bitterness. But I do think it's worth saying plainly, because I think we don't always let ourselves say the plain thing when it involves someone we love. What Naomi did was wrong. It was wrong in the small, specific ways. The lie about her father being an engineer, the lie about me being gone, and it was also wrong in the larger way that takes longer to name. She looked at everything I had given her, every sacrifice and every late night and every dollar I didn't spend on myself so she could spend it on her future, and she decided it was something to be concealed. She decided that who I was made her less, and she acted on that decision for years, quietly and deliberately, in ways that required real intelligence and real effort to maintain. That's the part that still gets me, if I'm honest. It wasn't thoughtless. It took a kind of cleverness to build that story and keep it standing. But cleverness without a conscience is just a more sophisticated way of causing harm. I raised her to be smart. I didn't raise her to use that against the people who loved her most. I've thought a lot about what I actually taught her and what I failed to teach her. I think I showed her resilience every single day. She watched me work 2 jobs without complaining. She watched me hold things together when they wanted to fall apart. She saw what it looked like to keep going when keeping going was the only option available. And I think some part of her absorbed that, the endurance, the forward motion, but without the other part, the part about what you owe to the truth, the part about what it costs, not just you, but everyone around you, when you build your life on something false. Because here is what I know. After 60-something years of living it, the truth doesn't stay buried. It is not dramatic about it. It doesn't announce itself. It just surfaces, eventually, the way water finds its level. And when it does, the person who has been carrying the lie pays a price that is almost always higher than whatever they were trying to avoid in the first place. Naomi lost months of her marriage to the fallout of something she could have prevented with one honest conversation. Sebastian's trust, once shaken, doesn't just come back because you want it to. That is not punishment from the outside. That is just the way things work. What I hope for her now. Genuinely hope, the way I hoped for her all those years ago at the kitchen table on Elm Street, is that she finds the courage to stay honest, even when it's costly. That she learns to sit with discomfort instead of building around it. That she understands, the way I had to understand it too at different points in my own life, that who you are is not something to outrun. It is something to grow into. I took the train back to Sudbury. I made myself a cup of tea. I put the birth certificate back in the drawer next to my mother's letters and the photograph from her grade 12 graduation, and I left it there where it has always belonged. She called me that Sunday. We talked for 2 hours. It was a beginning. That's enough for me.